The doors to the Galactic Council chamber opened with a sound like thunder. Daesung walked through them and immediately felt small. He always felt small in places like this. The chamber was built for giants, and giants filled every corner of it. To his left stood 3 Vrex delegates, each one 12 feet tall with scales that shimmered green and gold under the station lights. Their eyes were yellow and cold, watching him like predators watch prey. To his right, the Chitros representatives clicked their mandibles together in what might have been conversation, or might have been laughter. They stood on 4 legs with 2 more arms folded across their chitinous chests, easily 8 feet tall even in their relaxed posture. Further back, Illumine floated in its containment field, a being of pure crystalline energy that rose 15 feet into the air. It pulsed with soft blue light, and Daesung couldn't tell if it was looking at him or not. Near the observation windows, 2 Krell delegates sat in their water tanks, their amphibious bodies nearly 9 feet long, gills opening and closing as they breathed the oxygenated fluid. Daesung was 5'7". He wore a simple dark suit. He carried no weapons, no ceremonial armor, no technological enhancements. He walked to the human delegation's platform, and every eye in the chamber followed him. Behind him came Hyunwoo, his aide, carrying a data tablet. Hyunwoo was even shorter than Daesung, barely 5'4", with glasses that made him look more like a student than a tactical analyst. Jiwon followed last, the team's chief scientist. Her hair pulled back in a practical bun, her expression neutral and calculating. The chamber fell silent as Daesung reached his platform. The silence wasn't respectful. It was the silence of a room full of beings who didn't know what to make of him. The council speaker, a Lumini named Lixara, spoke first. Its voice came from everywhere and nowhere, resonating through the chamber like wind chimes. The representative from Earth has arrived. We may begin the summit. Thexnor, the lead Vrex delegate, made a sound that was definitely laughter. It was a hissing, rattling noise that echoed off the walls. This is their diplomat. This tiny creature. I have seen larger prey animals on the hunting grounds of my homeworld. Several delegates shifted uncomfortably. Some species had learned not to insult humans. Others, like the Vrex, had not fought alongside humanity in any conflict. They knew humans only by reputation, and reputation was easy to dismiss when you stood 12 feet tall and could tear steel with your bare claws. Daesung didn't react. He simply looked up at Thexnor and waited. Hyunwoo whispered, "He's trying to provoke you. Standard dominance display." "I know," Daesung said quietly. He'd seen it before. Size mattered in galactic politics. Most species judged capability by physical presence. A small diplomat was assumed to represent a weak civilization. The Chitros representative, Krillix, spoke next. Its voice was layered, multiple tones at once, the sound of a hive mind speaking as one. "We have called this summit to address the Vrex expansion into neutral territories. 3 colonies have been displaced. Trade routes have been disrupted. The Vrex refuse to acknowledge our complaints." Thexnor slammed a clawed hand on his platform. "We acknowledge nothing. Those territories were unclaimed. We needed resources. We took them. This is the law of the galaxy. The strong survive, the weak adapt or die." "That's not law," Jiwon said, her voice carrying clearly despite her small frame. "That's just bullying with better grammar." The chamber erupted in a mix of reactions. Some delegates made sounds of approval. Others hissed or clicked in disapproval. Thexnor's eyes narrowed to slits. "And what would humans know of galactic law?" Thexnor said. "You've been in this council for barely 20 cycles. You are children playing at politics." Daesung stepped forward to the edge of his platform. "We know enough," he said. His voice was calm, steady, not raised. Somehow that made it carry further than shouting would have. "We know that expansion without negotiation is aggression. We know that taking what you want without regard for others leads to conflict. And we know that conflict has consequences. Is that a threat, little human?" Thexnor leaned forward, his massive head lowering to bring his eyes level with Daesung's platform. "Do you think your tiny species frightens the Vrex Empire?" Daesung met his gaze without blinking. "No," he said simply. "I don't think we frighten you. I think you don't know enough about us to be frightened. Yet." The silence that followed was different. It was the silence of beings who remembered things the Vrex had forgotten or never learned. Lixara pulsed brighter. "Perhaps we should allow the human delegation to present their position. They have offered to mediate this dispute." Thexnor straightened up, laughing again. "Mediate? What can humans mediate? You are a species of primitives who barely mastered faster than light travel. Your ships are slow. Your weapons are outdated. Your population is confined to one system. You think you can stand between the Vrex and our destiny? Hyunwoo pulled up data on his tablet, ready to present evidence of human diplomatic successes. But Daesung raised a hand, stopping him. Let me ask you something, Daesung said to Thexnor. Do you know why humanity is still here? Thexnor tilted his head. What? Earth is not a paradise world. Our planet has tried to kill us with ice ages, plagues, predators, natural disasters, and atmospheric changes. Our species spent thousands of years fighting each other over resources. We developed weapons capable of destroying our own civilization. We nearly succeeded in wiping ourselves out several times. Do you know why we're still here? The chamber was listening now. Even Thexnor seemed curious despite himself. Because we refuse to die, Daesung said. The words were simple, but they landed with weight. We don't give up. We don't surrender. When the universe says we can't survive, we prove it wrong. When we face an enemy we can't defeat, we fight anyway. When we're outmatched, outgunned, and outnumbered, we find a way. Pretty words, Thexnor said, but his voice had lost some of its mockery. Not words, said a voice from the back of the chamber. An older delegate, a Krell named Gorun, spoke up. Truth, I was at the Vex incident. I saw what humans do when they decide something must be done. Several other delegates shifted. The Vex incident, 5 years ago. The story that made humanity's reputation. Daesung saw the recognition in the room. The older species knew. The newer ones were curious. We're not here to threaten anyone, Daesung continued. We're here because conflict benefits no one. The Vrex want resources. The displaced colonies want their homes. There are solutions that don't require war. But make no mistake, if you choose war, you should know who you're fighting. Thexnor stared at him for a long moment. Then he laughed, but it sounded forced. One incident does not make you warriors. No, Daesung agreed. It makes us survivors. There's a difference, the council speaker pulsed. We will take a recess. When we return, both sides will present their positions formally. As the delegates began to disperse, Hyunwoo leaned close to Daesung. They're going to look up the Vex incident now. The ones who don't know. Good, Daesung said. Let them learn. Jiwon smiled slightly. You made quite an impression. Not me, Daesung said, watching Thexnor exit the chamber, the massive Vrex still glancing back at him. They did. Everyone who came before us. Everyone who proved that humans don't quit. He looked around the chamber, at the platforms built for beings twice his size, at the accommodations made for species that could breathe underwater or existed as energy. He was the smallest in the room. But everyone who mattered knew exactly who he was. 5 years earlier, Captain Daesung stood on the bridge of the ESS Indomitable and watched his death approach on the scanner screens. The Vex swarm filled the displays like a spreading infection, billions of organic ships moving as one organism, consuming everything in their path. Update, he said, his voice steady despite what the numbers told him. Lieutenant Hyunwoo looked up from his tactical station. His face was pale, but his hands didn't shake as he worked. The swarm will reach the refugee station in 71 hours. Current fleet strength, 20 Earth vessels. Estimated Vex forces, 400,000 individual combat organisms coordinated by 17 hive nodes. Odds? Daesung asked. Hyunwoo met his eyes. Mathematically? We can't win, sir. We can't even slow them down significantly. Every weapon we have, they've already adapted to. Energy weapons, projectile weapons, electromagnetic pulses. The Vex encountered all of them from other species. They learn. They evolve. They overcome. Behind them, Jiwon was working at the science station. She'd been analyzing Vex biology for 3 weeks straight, barely sleeping, searching for any weakness. They're not invincible, she said without looking up. Nothing is invincible. There has to be a way. 17 civilizations thought the same thing, Hyunwoo said quietly. They're gone now. Every single one. The refugee station they were protecting held 2 million beings from 14 different species. When the Vex first appeared 6 months ago, the Galactic Council had tried to fight. They'd sent fleets, deployed weapons that could crack planets, used technology that humanity didn't even understand. Nothing worked. The Vex adapted to everything. They learned from every attack and became immune to it. So the Council did the only logical thing. They evacuated. They pulled back behind quarantine lines and abandoned entire sectors of space. Better to lose territory than lose species. But the evacuation wasn't complete. The refugee station held beings who'd been too far from the safe zones, people who couldn't move fast enough, children and elderly and sick who needed more time. The council had made the calculation. 2 million beings weren't worth risking the fleets that could save billions. Earth disagreed. "Sir, we're receiving another transmission from the council," the communications officer said. "They're ordering us to withdraw." "Ignore it," Daesung said. It was the 5th such order. He'd ignored all of them. The human fleet was tiny by galactic standards. 20 ships, most of them older models that other species would have scrapped years ago. Earth didn't have the technology or resources of the older civilizations. Humanity had only joined the galactic community 30 years ago, and they were still catching up. But they'd sent everything they could spare. Every ship, every crew member who volunteered, and they'd all volunteered. Daesung walked between the stations on his bridge, looking at his crew. Young faces mostly, barely trained. Earth's space navy was new enough that some of these people had only been in uniform for 2 years. They knew the odds. Hyunwoo had made sure everyone understood the math. They were going anyway. "Jiwon, tell me you found something," Daesung said. She finally looked up. Her eyes were red from exhaustion, but they were sharp. "Maybe. The Vex adapt to energy signatures. They've encountered every type of weapon the galaxy uses. Lasers, plasma, particle beams, they've seen it all and learned to defend against it. So we can't hurt them," Hyunwoo said. "With those weapons, no." Jiwon smiled. And it was not a nice smile. "But they've never fought humans before. They've never encountered our weapons." "Our weapons are less advanced," Daesung said. "Kinetic projectiles, chemical explosives, primitive nuclear devices. If their energy weapons didn't work, why would our older technology?" "Because it's older," Jiwon said. "The Vex learn from experience. They've never experienced gunpowder. They've never seen a nuclear bomb. In all their encounters with advanced civilizations, no one used chemistry-based weapons. Why would they? Energy is cleaner, more efficient, more powerful." Hyunwoo was already running calculations. "Even if our weapons surprise them initially, they'll adapt within hours. Maybe days if we're lucky. It won't be enough to destroy the swarm." "No," Jiwon agreed. "But it might be enough to hurt them, and I have an idea for that." She pulled up schematics of the ship's reactor core. "Every vessel in our fleet has a fusion reactor. They're old, inefficient by galactic standards, but they work, and they can be overloaded." The bridge went very quiet. "You want to turn our ships into bombs," Daesung said. "Very large bombs," Jiwon confirmed. "The Vex coordinate through hive nodes. 17 of them control the entire swarm. If we can destroy the nodes, the swarm loses cohesion. The individual organisms might survive, but they won't be organized. The refugee station could escape during the confusion." "How close would we need to get?" Daesung asked, though he already knew the answer. "Point-blank range," Hyunwoo said, his fingers moving across his tactical display. "We'd have to fly directly into the swarm, get past the outer defenses, penetrate to where the hive nodes are located, and detonate our reactors in proximity to them." "Suicide runs," someone whispered. Daesung looked around his bridge. Every person here had families, lives, dreams. They'd signed up to defend Earth, not to die in empty space for aliens they'd never met. "I need to speak to the other captains," he said. "Jiwon, prepare the reactor modifications. Hyunwoo, calculate the flight paths and detonation points. Everyone else, continue preparations for engagement." 3 hours later, Daesung sat in his ready room, with the holographic projections of his 19 other captains floating in the air around him. He'd explained Jiwon's plan. He'd been clear about what it meant. "This is voluntary," he said. "Anyone who doesn't want to participate can stay with the refugee station as escort. No judgment, no consequences. This isn't an order. It's a request." Captain Bora of the ESS Defiant spoke first. She was older than Daesung, a veteran of Earth's last civil conflict. "How many ships do we need for the plan to work?" "Hyunwoo estimates 17, Daesung said. 1 for each hive node, maybe a few extra for redundancy?" "Then I'm in," Bora said simply. One by one, the other captains agreed, all 19 of them. "We'll draw lots for who stays," Captain Minho suggested. He was the youngest captain in the fleet, barely 30. "Someone needs to survive to tell the story." "No," Daesung said. I'm staying. The flagship is the newest ship, with the best defenses. It should escort the refugees. With respect, sir, no, Hyunwoo said. He'd entered the ready room without Daesung noticing. You're needed for what comes after. Earth needs experienced leadership. The galaxy needs to see that humans can make hard decisions without losing themselves. Hyunwoo. I've already modified the Indomitable's reactor. Hyunwoo interrupted. And I've locked you out of the pilot controls. You're not going, sir. Daesung stood up. That's insubordination. Yes, sir, Hyunwoo agreed. He smiled, and it was the first time Daesung had seen him smile in weeks. Court-martial me if you survive? They argued for 20 minutes. Daesung ordered, threatened, even begged. Hyunwoo wouldn't budge. Finally, Jiwon put her hand on Daesung's shoulder. Let him go, she said softly. Let them all go. They've made their choice. The next day, 20 ships flew into the Vex swarm. 19 of them carried volunteers who knew they weren't coming back. The 20th, the Indomitable, held Daesung and a skeleton crew, hanging back just far enough to protect the refugee station. Daesung watched on the screens as his ships penetrated the swarm. The Vex couldn't understand what they were doing at first. Ships didn't fly directly into enemy formations. It was suicide. Then the first reactor detonated and a sphere of nuclear fire consumed a hive node and everything around it. Then the second. Then the third. Hyunwoo's ship was 17th. His last transmission was 4 words. Sir, it's been perfect. Then he was gone. All 19 ships. 1,847 crew members. They flew into hell and took the Vex swarm with them. The swarm didn't die completely, but it broke. Without the hive nodes, the organisms lost coordination. They scattered, became confused, attacked each other. The refugee station jumped to hyperspace and escaped. 2 million beings survived because 19 human ships refused to let them die. The galaxy noticed. The council chamber felt colder when they reconvened. Daesung noticed that the younger delegates were looking at him differently now. They'd spent the recess researching the Vex incident. Now they knew. Vexnor seemed different too. The Vex ambassador still carried himself with pride. But there was calculation in his yellow eyes now. He wasn't dismissing the humans anymore. He was evaluating them. That was almost worse. The session will continue, Lixara announced, the Luminized voice echoing through the chamber. The human delegation has offered to mediate the territorial dispute. The Vex delegation, do you accept their mediation? Vexnor was silent for a long moment. Then he spoke, and his voice was measured, careful. The Vex Empire recognizes human courage. The Vex incident proved that your species does not fear death. But courage and wisdom are different things. Mediation requires understanding of galactic politics, of the complex relationships between species, of the economics and military realities that govern our decisions. He paused, letting his words sink in. Humans are new to the galaxy. You have been part of the Council for barely 20 cycles. You have never governed multiple worlds, never managed the resources of an empire, never made decisions that affect billions across dozens of systems. With respect, you lack the experience to mediate a dispute of this magnitude. It was a clever argument. Vexnor wasn't questioning human bravery anymore. He was questioning their competence. And unlike mockery, this criticism had weight. Earth was young in galactic terms. They were still learning. Jiwon leaned close to Daesung. He's not wrong, she whispered. We don't have the diplomatic experience of older species. But we have something they don't, Daesung murmured back. What? We're still alive despite being young. He stood up. Ambassador Vexnor makes a fair point. Humans are inexperienced in many areas of galactic politics. We're still learning the proper protocols, the historical contexts, the intricate web of alliances and grudges that define this council. Vexnor nodded, pleased that Daesung was conceding. But, Daesung continued, experience isn't the same as capability. Earth survived and thrived despite being young, precisely because we don't rely on old assumptions. We find new solutions, we adapt. We see problems differently than species who have been doing things the same way for millennia. Pretty philosophy, Vexnor said. But mediation is not about philosophy. It's about practical understanding of power and resources. It's about knowing when to compromise and when to stand firm. These are skills that take time to develop. Then test us, Daesung said simply. The chamber went quiet. What? Vexnor asked. You claim we lack the practical skills to mediate. test that claim. There must be some way in council tradition to verify capability. Krillix, the Chitros representative, clicked its mandibles. There is the proving. It is an ancient tradition, rarely invoked. A challenge to demonstrate worthiness. Lixara pulsed with interest. The proving has not been used in 70 cycles. It is considered aggressive, but legal, Daesung said. If Ambassador Thexnor doubts our capability, let him issue the challenge. We will answer it. Thexnor's eyes narrowed. He hadn't expected this. The proving was designed to favor strong, experienced species. It tested leadership, tactical thinking, and the ability to overcome impossible situations. For the Vrex, it was a showcase. For humans, it should be a humiliation. Very well, Thexnor said slowly. I invoke the proving. Let humanity demonstrate their capability. The next day, Daesung stood in the simulation chamber with his team. He'd brought Jiwon and Hyunwoo plus 2 others, Minji, a combat strategist who'd trained Earth Special Forces, and Taeyang, a young pilot with something to prove. Taeyang's older brother had died in the Vex incident. He'd been on Captain Bo-Ra's ship. The simulation chamber was massive, designed to accommodate beings of different sizes and abilities. Holographic projectors could create scenarios of any complexity. The chamber could simulate different gravities, atmospheres, even different sensory environments. Thexnor stood at the observation platform above them. We will use the siege of Grextar, he announced. It is the most celebrated battle in Vrex history. 500 warriors held a fortress against 50,000 enemies for 3 days. It tests courage, tactical awareness, resource management, and the ability to inspire others under impossible pressure. Minji studied the simulation parameters as they loaded. This is designed for Vrex physiology, she said quietly. They're naturally armored, have regenerative abilities, and are physically superior to most species. The scenario assumes defenders with those capabilities. Can we win? Daesung asked. Hyunwoo was already running calculations on his tablet. Not by fighting the way the scenario expects. The fortress defenses are designed for 12-foot warriors with claws and scales. We're not equipped for that kind of defense. Then we don't defend, Daesung said. The simulation began. They materialized inside a fortress made of dark stone, surrounded by walls 40 feet high. Outside, an army approached. The enemy force was overwhelming, visible on the horizon like a dark wave. The scenario provided them with weapons appropriate for Vrex warriors. Heavy energy weapons, melee blades designed for clawed hands, armor too large for human frames. It also gave them 50 simulated defenders to command, though those defenders would only follow reasonable orders within Vrex military doctrine. Status, Daesung ordered. Minji checked the fortress systems. Walls are strong but not impenetrable. We have 3 days of supplies. Energy reserves for weapons will last maybe 2 days of heavy fighting. The enemy has siege equipment and air support. They'll breach the walls within a day if we let them set up. Enemy command structure? Daesung asked. Taeyang was studying the approaching army through magnified displays. Traditional formation. Command tent in the rear. Supply lines extending back over the ridge. They're following standard siege doctrine. Surround. Cut off supplies, bombard until walls fall. Then assault. They're doing what they always do, Jiwon observed. Because it always works. Daesung looked at his team. The scenario expects us to hold the fortress for 3 days. To fight defensively, to preserve resources, to make the enemy pay for every foot of ground. That's how the Vrex won the real battle, Minji said. Through endurance and defensive brilliance. We're not Vrex, Daesung said. And endurance isn't our only strength. Hyunwoo, can we rig the fortress reactor to overload? Hyunwoo looked up sharply. Then he smiled. Yes, but it would destroy the fortress completely. Good, Minji, I want exit routes mapped. We're not staying here. Taeyang, you're going to steal us an enemy vehicle. Jiwon, you're going to identify their command structure and supply points. We have 3 hours before they expect us to be ready. We're not going to be here when they arrive. The team moved into action. They didn't prepare defenses. They prepared to leave. 2 hours later, they executed. The 50 simulated defenders didn't understand the orders at first. Vrex warriors didn't abandon fortresses. But Daesung explained it simply. We're not defending ground. We're eliminating the enemy. They opened the main gates and charged out, not to meet the enemy in honorable combat, but to strike at their command structure while they were still setting up siege positions. Tae-yang led a small team and captured enemy vehicles straight into the supply depot. Minji coordinated strikes on communication nodes. The enemy army was confused. This wasn't how the scenario was supposed to work. Defenders didn't attack. Fortresses didn't become bases for offensive operations. Ji-won rigged the fortress reactor just like she'd rigged the ship reactors 5 years ago. When the enemy finally organized and pushed toward the fortress to capture it, they found it abandoned except for the overloading reactor core. The explosion took out a third of their army. While the enemy reeled from the devastation, Daesung's forces hit their command structure. Not in a fair fight, but in a targeted strike that killed their leadership and scattered their coordination. Without orders, the enemy army fragmented. The simulation ended 47 minutes after it began. Not 3 days. Not a heroic defensive stand. A quick, brutal elimination of enemy capability. The observation chamber was silent. Thexnor stared at the results. You destroyed the fortress. Yes, Daesung said, breathing hard from the simulated combat. The scenario was about defense, about holding ground. The scenario was about surviving impossible odds, Daesung corrected. We survived. The enemy didn't. That's victory. You were supposed to fight with honor. We fought to win, Minji said. Honor doesn't matter if you're dead. Krillix clicked its mandibles in what might have been approval. The humans satisfied the victory conditions of the scenario. The fortress stood for 3 days because the enemy was eliminated before 3 days passed. Technically, this is a valid completion. It's not how the Vrex did it, Thexnor protested. No, Daesung agreed. It's how humans do it. We don't fight fair. We fight smart. We don't preserve resources. We use them. We don't hold ground. We achieve objectives. Lixara pulsed brightly. The proving is satisfied. The human delegation has demonstrated tactical capability. Thexnor looked like he wanted to argue more, but he couldn't. The rules were clear. Daesung had won. You fight without honor, Thexnor said finally. We fight to survive, Daesung replied. And we're still here. The council took a recess after the proving. Daesung expected celebrations or at least acknowledgement from other delegates. Instead, he found something else, fear. Not fear of the Vrex anymore, but fear of what humans represented. Ji-won found him in the observation deck looking out at the stars beyond the station. We have a problem, she said without preamble. Only one? Daesung asked tiredly. A big one. She pulled out her tablet and showed him data streams. During the recess, I was accessing the Council's shared databases, partly to research Vrex territorial claims, partly because I'm curious. I found something strange. The data on her screen showed deep space sensor readings, probe reports, and astronomical surveys. At first, Daesung didn't see anything unusual. Then Ji-won highlighted a pattern. Ships were going missing at the Galactic Rim, not just 1 or 2, dozens from multiple species, all in the same general region of space. Piracy? Daesung suggested. That's what the official reports say. But look at this, she pulled up more data. The Vrex have been quietly reinforcing their borders in that direction. They've moved fleet assets, established supply depots, and fortified positions, all while publicly claiming they need resources from neutral zones. They're preparing for something, Daesung said. Understanding dawning. Not something, someone. Ji-won's fingers moved across the tablet. I accessed some classified Vrex military logs. Don't ask how. What I found? She paused, and Daesung saw genuine worry in her eyes. There's something out there beyond the rim. Something that scared the Vrex enough to make them run. Daesung looked at the data. Encrypted reports, partial sensor readings, fragmented transmissions. The picture they painted was terrifying. An unknown fleet, massive in scale, moving through empty space toward the galactic core. The Vrex had encountered their scouts 3 years ago. The scouts had destroyed a Vrex colony world in hours. We need to tell the Council, Daesung said. And say what? That I hacked Vrex classified files? That there's a threat we can barely prove exists? They'll think it's a human trick to gain political advantage. Daesung considered this. Ji-won was right. The Council was already nervous about humanity after the proving. Bringing up a massive external threat with questionable evidence would look like manipulation. We need to talk to Thexnor directly, he decided. Finding Thexnor wasn't difficult. The Vrex ambassador was in his private quarters, which were built to accommodate his size. Daesung had to request entry, and he half expected to be refused. Instead, Thexnor let him in. The Vrex quarters were sparse, functional. No decorations, no personal items. It reminded Daesung of military barracks. "Have you come to gloat about your victory?" Thexnor asked. He was looking out a viewing port at the stars, his back to Daesung. "No," Daesung said. "I came to ask about what you're really running from." Thexnor went very still. When he turned around, his expression was unreadable. "I don't know what you mean." "Yes, you do. The territorial expansion, the resource gathering, the military buildup on your rimward borders. You're not conquering. You're preparing for something that scared the Vrex Empire badly enough to make you flee your own territory." For a long moment, Thexnor said nothing. Then he moved to a secured terminal and entered access codes. A holographic display appeared, showing data that made Daesung's blood run cold. 3 years ago, Thexnor said quietly, "Our exploration fleets encountered something at the edge of mapped space. We thought it was an ancient derelict fleet at first. We were wrong. The display showed images of ships, massive vessels kilometers long, built with technology that didn't match any known species. Their design was alien in a way that made the Vrex and Chitros and Lumini look familiar by comparison. They didn't respond to communications. They didn't acknowledge our presence. They simply moved into Vrex space and began harvesting the third colony world. Population, 4 billion. Daesung felt sick. Harvesting? Every biological organism was collected. Every structure was dismantled and processed. Every resource was extracted. In 6 hours, a world that had been inhabited for 300 years became an empty rock. Then they moved on. What happened to the people? We don't know. They were taken, cataloged, studied perhaps. We managed to evacuate 2 other colonies before the fleet reached them. We threw our military at the invaders. We used weapons that could crack moons. Nothing stopped them. Nothing even slowed them down. Thexnor's claws clenched. So we ran. We evacuated our rimward territories and fell back toward the galactic core. We needed resources, territory, defensive positions. We needed to prepare for when they come again. Because they will come. That fleet is still moving inward, destroying or harvesting everything in its path. Why didn't you tell the council? Daesung asked. Because the council would panic. They would argue about what to do while the threat got closer. They would form committees and debate protocols while worlds died. The Vrex learned long ago that survival requires action, not discussion. Daesung understood. It wasn't so different from how humanity approached problems. We need to tell them anyway, he said. The galaxy needs to prepare. They won't believe it, Thexnor said. They'll think it's a Vrex trick, or a human manipulation. You saw how they reacted to your mediation offer. They're more afraid of change than of extinction. Then we make them believe. That night, Daesung called an emergency session of the council. He brought Jiwan's data and Thexnor's evidence. He presented everything clearly, methodically, without dramatics. The council's reaction was exactly what Thexnor had predicted. This is clearly a fabrication, Krillus said. Its multiple voices layered with skepticism. The Vrex create a phantom threat to justify their expansion. The humans support this fiction to establish themselves as mediators. It is transparent manipulation, Lixara pulsed uncertainly. The evidence is concerning but incomplete. We cannot commit galactic resources based on partial data and Vrex testimony. We need independent verification. Other delegates agreed. Some accused the Vrex of deception. Others accused humanity of naivety. A few suggested this was a conspiracy between both species. No one took the threat seriously. Daesung stood on his platform, watching his evidence be dismissed. Hyunwoo looked frustrated. Ji-won's expression was dark. They'd brought proof and it wasn't enough. You're making a mistake, Daesung said. While you debate, this fleet gets closer. While you demand more evidence, more worlds might be dying. Then provide better evidence, Krillix said. Send scouts. Gather data. Return with proof that satisfies scientific standards. That would take months, Thexnor protested. By then we will have proper information to make informed decisions, Lixara interrupted. The council cannot act on fear and speculation. We need facts. The session ended with nothing resolved. No action taken. No preparations made. The council decided to form a committee to investigate the claims. The committee would report back in 3 months. Back in their quarters, Daesung's team sat in frustrated silence. They won't prepare, Minji said. Even if we prove the threat is real, they'll move too slowly. Committees and debates and protocols. By the time they're ready to act, it might be too late. We could send our own scouts, Taiyang suggested. Earthships gathering evidence. It would take too long, Yunwu said. And we'd be risking our people on what might be a suicide mission, just to gather proof that the council might still ignore. Jiwan looked at Dae-sung. You have an idea. I can see it. Dae-sung nodded slowly. I do, but you're not going to like it. Tell us anyway, Jiwan said. The council won't act because they don't feel threatened. They think this is either a lie or a distant problem. They're comfortable, complacent. He paused. We need to make them uncomfortable. How? Minji asked. We make them afraid, Dae-sung said. Not of the fleet beyond the rim. Of us. The room went quiet as they processed this. You want to threaten the council? Hyunwoo said carefully. No, I want to make Earth look like we're preparing for war. If we mobilize, if we start acting like the threat is real and imminent, other species will have to investigate. They'll need to know if we're the real danger or if we know something they don't. That's manipulation, Jiwon said. Yes, Dae-sung agreed. It's cynical and manipulative and exactly the kind of politics I hate. But it will work. The galaxy has spent 5 years being nervous about what humans might do. Let's use that fear productively. And if they decide we're the threat? Taeyang asked. If they move against Earth instead? Then we explain everything again with their full attention this time. Either way, we force them to look where we're pointing. Thexnor arrived at their quarters an hour later. I heard your plan, he said without preamble. It is risky. It might turn the entire council against both our species. Do you have a better idea? Dae-sung asked. Thexnor was quiet for a moment. Then, no, but I will support you. The Vrex will coordinate with Earth's mobilization. If humans are preparing for war, we'll do the same. Together, we'll be impossible to ignore. Dae-sung extended his hand. Thexnor looked at it for a moment, then carefully took the human gesture of alliance in his clawed grip. They were the smallest and the proudest species in the room, and they were about to terrify the galaxy into action. The emergency council session was called within 24 hours of Dae-sung's announcement. He stood at his platform, smaller than everyone else in the room, and read from a prepared statement that had been carefully crafted to cause maximum alarm. Earth hereby invokes its right under Galactic Statute 47, Section 12, Preemptive Defense. We have identified an existential threat to our species, and potentially to all species in this galaxy, as is our legal right. We are mobilizing our full military capability to address this threat. We will share intelligence with any species that requests it. We will coordinate with allied forces, but we will not wait for council approval to defend ourselves. The chamber erupted. Delegates shouted in multiple languages and communication methods. Lixara pulsed so brightly that the light hurt to look at directly. This is outrageous. Krillix's layered voices cut through the noise. Humans cannot unilaterally declare mobilization. The council must approve such actions. Read Statute 47, Dae-sung said calmly. Any species may invoke preemptive defense if they face an existential threat. The council may debate whether the threat is real, but they cannot prevent us from defending ourselves. This is the threat you claimed before, Lixara said. The mysterious fleet. We told you we would investigate. Your committee will report in 3 months, Dae-sung said. We don't have 3 months. The threat is real. It is approaching, and Earth will not wait to be harvested like the Vrex colonies were. You're trying to force our hand, another delegate accused. Yes, Dae-sung admitted simply. I am, because talking hasn't worked. Evidence hasn't worked. So now I'm doing what humans do best, acting while others debate. Thexnor stood at his platform. The Vrex Empire supports Earth's assessment. We are also mobilizing our forces. If the Council wishes to stop us, they are welcome to try. The implication was clear. 2 military powers were preparing for war. Either the threat was real, or these 2 species were about to become the galaxy's biggest problem. This is madness, Krillix said. You're going to start a war based on speculation and fear. We're preparing to survive, Dae-sung corrected. There's a difference. Over the next week, the galaxy watched Earth transform. Every shipyard went to maximum production. Reserves were called up. Defensive installations were upgraded. Trade ships were converted to military support vessels. It was a mobilization on a scale that humanity hadn't attempted since their last World War, and it terrified everyone. because Earth's military was small by galactic standards. But everyone remembered the Vex incident. They remembered what humans did when they decided something needed to be done. If Earth was preparing for war, it meant they expected to sacrifice whatever it took to win. The question was, win against what? Other species couldn't ignore it. The Lumini sent deep space observation teams to the galactic rim. The Chitros deployed their fastest scout fleets. Even the Krell, who rarely left their water worlds, dispatched exploratory vessels. Everyone wanted to know if the human threat was real, or if humans themselves were the threat. It took 11 days. The Lumini scouts found it first. A fleet of ancient vessels, each one the size of a small moon, moving through empty space in perfect formation. They had already consumed 4 systems that the Lumini hadn't known were inhabited. The scouts barely escaped to report back. The Chitros found wreckage from ships that had gone missing over the past 3 years. Analysis showed they'd been taken apart molecule by molecule, studied and catalogued. Whatever was driving that ancient fleet wasn't just destroying civilizations. It was learning from them. The Krell found something worse. Evidence that this fleet had passed through the galaxy before, millions of years ago. Ancient ruins on dead worlds showed the same harvesting patterns. Whatever this was, it was old, patient, and thorough. The council reconvened. The atmosphere was different now. No more skepticism. No more casual dismissal. Every delegate had seen the evidence. The threat was real. Lixara pulsed with what might have been fear. The data is conclusive. We face an extinction-level threat. The question now is, what do we do? We fight, Daesung said simply. Fight? With what? Krillix demanded. That fleet has destroyed everything it encountered. It has technology millions of years more advanced than ours. We cannot defeat it. The Vrex couldn't defeat it alone, Thexnor said. But the Vrex were alone. We're not suggesting solo resistance. We're suggesting unity. A combined fleet, G1 added, stepping forward to present tactical data. Every species contributes what they can. The Lumini have energy shield technology that might resist their harvesting beams. The Chitros have coordination algorithms that could help us move as one force. The Krell have biological computers that might resist digital infiltration. The Vrex have experience fighting them. And humans? She paused. Humans have the willingness to do whatever it takes, Daesung finished. We've proven that. Everyone in this room knows it. The delegates were quiet. They did know it. That was exactly what worried them. If we unite our forces, Lixara said slowly, we would need a unified command structure, someone to coordinate 14 different species with different technologies, different tactics, different priorities. The Lumini have the most experi, Krillix suggested. The Chitros have superior computational abilities for coordination, Lixara countered. The Vrex have actually fought this enemy, Thexnor pointed out. They were already fracturing, already arguing about who should lead. Daesung watched it happen and felt a familiar frustration. This was what killed civilizations, the inability to act because everyone wanted to be in charge. It should be the humans, a voice said. Everyone turned. Goran, the old Krell delegate who'd mentioned the Vex incident before, floated forward in his water tank. I have served on this council for 73 cycles. I have seen wars, diplomatic crises, and near extinctions. I know. He paused, looking around the chamber. It is not size. It is not technology. It is not even courage, though courage helps. It is the willingness to make hard choices when hard choices are all that remain. The humans have proven they can make those choices. At the Vex incident, they sacrificed everything to save beings they'd never met. In the proving, they won by breaking every rule we expected them to follow. Now they've forced us to confront a threat we wanted to ignore. Goran turned his tank toward Daesung. I do not like humans. They are unpredictable, aggressive, and too willing to die, but I trust them to do what others cannot, to look at impossible situations and refuse to accept impossibility. Other delegates murmured, some in agreement, others in concern. Are we seriously considering putting humans in command of a galactic military force? Krillix asked, do you have a better option? Vex nor Chali actually beaten impossible odds? Someone who has proven they'll sacrifice their own people to save others? Someone the entire galaxy is already afraid of? That last point seemed to decide it. Fear was motivating, and every species in that room had spent the last 2 weeks afraid of what humans might do. Better to direct that capability at the real threat. The vote wasn't unanimous. Some species abstained. Others voted against. but the majority agreed. Humanity would lead the defense. Daesung became Supreme Commander of the Galactic Defense Force. It took 3 months to assemble the fleet. Thousands of ships from hundreds of worlds. Hyunwoo worked 18-hour days coordinating logistics across species with completely different operational standards. Ji-won led scientific teams developing weapons that combined 14 different technological approaches. Min-ji trained integrated combat units where humans taught aliens how to think like survivors. Tae-yang commanded a wing of mixed-species fighters, teaching pilots from peaceful civilizations how to fight when fighting was the only option left. On the day the fleet was ready to launch, Daesung stood on the bridge of the flagship and looked at the tactical display. So many ships, so many different species, all of them looking to humans for leadership. An aide approached him, young, nervous. "Sir, are you afraid?" Daesung thought about that question. He thought about Hyunwoo, dying in the Vex swarm. He thought about the 1,800 other crew members who'd flown into certain death.
He thought about every human who'd ever faced impossible odds and decided to fight anyway. "Yes," he said honestly.
"I'm terrified. Fear is just another thing we refuse to let stop us." The fleet jumped to hyperspace. They were heading toward the galactic rim, toward a battle that would determine if civilization survived or ended. They were outmatched. They were probably outgunned. They were facing an enemy that had destroyed worlds, but they weren't alone anymore. For the first time in galactic history, every species was fighting together, not because they loved each other, not because they shared ideals, but because one small human had shown them that survival required sacrifice, that winning required unity, and that sometimes the smallest being in the room was the one who made the hardest choices. The war was coming. But the galaxy was ready, because they'd learned from humanity. You don't need to be the biggest or the strongest to win. You just need to refuse to quit. Daesung stood at his command console, surrounded by beings from 14 different worlds, and prepared to do what humans did best: survive despite the odds. The fleet moved as one toward the approaching darkness. Whatever happened next, the galley